are three main types of influencers that you could consider as a part of your influencer campaign. It's helpful to decide which level of influencer you want to work with, as the expectations are typically different at each level. The first is micro influencers. These are people who generally have under 25,000 followers. Now, the number of followers here are rules of thumb. I would maybe consider increasing them as people have grown bigger followings, as social media has grown over time. I would probably put a micro influencer as somebody with under 100,000 followers, but a big part of it isn't just the audience size, it's also how engaged the audience is. So if I have 25,000 followers who really engage with almost everything I post, I get a ton of interaction and reactions. That's much more valuable than a follower size of 1 million where nobody seems to comment on or engage with my stuff. So view these follower numbers more as your engaged audience, not your total audience size. So when we say a micro influencer would have a following of under 25,000, that means an engaged following of under 25,000. So again, I could have an audience, if I added up my social audience everywhere, I'm probably going to come back close to 150,000, but a lot of those audiences on some platforms are not very engaged. For example, my Twitter audience is quite big, but I think you could argue whether or not they're well engaged. So you can think about the audience size, not just in terms of absolute numbers of followers, but think of it as active followers a little bit. So a micro influencer is going to have a smaller following, but the advantage of this is that they tend to be easy to work with and they're not approached by brands so often. What's nice about that is that means they're usually really excited to partner with a business, and they also view it as establishing themselves and establishing their credibility. The advantage of using micro influencers is that while their audience is small, it's often very niche and specific. So for example, my audience does really look to me for content about digital marketing and social media. So if you're a social media tool, I would be a perfect fit to be an influencer for you. And not just because of my online presence. So you want to think also more broadly, but I speak at events, I've written books. So there's a lot of touch points where I can promote and advocate for a product I like. But it's very specific. If you think of somebody with a larger following in the business world, let's say Mark Cuban from Shark Tank. Mark Cuban has a really big following as an entrepreneur, but people probably don't specifically look to him for social media advice. So a company with a social media tool wouldn't maybe be well served by using Mark Cuban as an influencer, because even though his audience is big, he's in the influencer or probably with him the celebrity category, he doesn't really have the same authority on that topic that a micro influencer has. So a micro influencer is usually really focused on their topic, which makes them valuable if your product is a good fit. And we'll talk more in a later module about how to evaluate influencers. And we actually have a sort of mathematical formula you can use to help evaluate influencers. But the next level after micro-influencer is an influencer. And this is 25 to 250,000. And again, I would look at this as more engaged followers versus total numbers. These people are typically used to working with brands and they view it as a business. So somebody at this level has a big enough audience that brands have probably approached them before, and they understand how to work with brands, what brands look for, and they are going to know what to do. They will expect to be financially compensated, and they are going to be more professional because they're more used to this. The disadvantage with the influencer level is a lot of them are influencers for many brands. So you'll also want to make sure that they're not competing with brands that are competitive to yours. And you may want to look at the total percentage of their content that's sponsored just to get a feel for how much content is sponsored versus organic. And then the last one is celebrity. And I would probably put celebrity at over a couple of million at this point. So a celebrity is somebody who has a big following. Oftentimes they're a celebrity in the real world, not just the social media or online world, but it could be both. And these people typically have an agent. They have clear guidelines. They know what they're worth. Some of the people in the celebrity category earn over $250,000 just for a couple of posts with a specific brand. So this is where you're talking big money, big plays, but potentially big payoffs as well. So as you think of the type of influencers that you want to work with, these are the three broad categories, but you can get even more specific as you start to think about the influencers for you. Maybe they're even smaller than the micro influencers. Maybe they're on the low end of the influencers so that they're still really interested in working with you. So think about the level of influencer that you want to work with as you start to envision how your campaign will come to life.